I am back again. Well, boy, Ukraine is on the front burner again. Um, last week I was talking about how the Nord Stream pipelines were blown and how that was a bridge that was burnt that Russia cannot cross anymore, or even Germany for that matter. Well, now we have a literal bridge that was destroyed, or at least very much destroyed. And that is the Kerch Strait Bridge, which links Russia to Crimea, which was built in 2018. And this was a massive explosion underneath the bridge. It was not a truck bomb. I know Russia was saying that it was a truck bomb, but clearly from the video you can see a huge explosion underneath the bridge, and severely weakened it. There's still another lane that could go through it, but if Ukraine can do it once, I'm sure they can do it twice. And so what does all this mean? What does this mean? Ukraine is gearing up for an offensive. There's no doubt about it. And this is a permanent cutoff of Crimea as far as Ukrainians are concerned, that Russia cannot resupply. And they can do a partial resupply. I mean, they can use ships. They can fly in supplies, but that's very difficult to do if you're fighting a full-scale conventional war, which is certainly the case here in Ukraine. Those troops constantly need supplies. This is not a guerrilla operation. This is not an occupation. They're not just oppressing the natives, if you will. They're fighting another army comparable to their own. And so this is full-scale conventional warfare. And the destruction of the bridge basically clues me in that Ukraine is ready to go on the offensive. And if they attack the Russians more on the northern side of Crimea, above Crimea, that's the only other way to get into Crimea physically. Then all roads leading to Crimea will be cut off. And that will spell the end of Russian occupation of Crimea, I guarantee it. So, so the Ukrainians are going to go on the offensive, and they need all roads going into Crimea to be blocked. And the destruction of the Kerch Strait Bridge, well, that was just built in 2018 by Russia, very much celebrated by Putin. He drove a truck right over the new bridge to inaugurate it, if you will. And so this bridge is pretty new. And so now it is mostly destroyed. They probably could bring, additional, they have one road available, and I think another railroad track. But clearly, this is a wake-up call for Russia. And, they're the ones who started this war. They invaded Ukraine. They've been invading Ukraine for quite some time. Only this year did the West wake up and actually decide to defend Ukraine. And that is a good thing. But, I've always felt that this Ukraine war not only had historical application, or implication in this case, I think it also has prophetic implication. Because if Russia is defeated in Ukraine, will that force it to attack the weaker areas of the world? And in this case, the Middle East. Right now, because of the war in Ukraine, as you very well know, the gas supplies are being cut off. Russia's stopping them, and the West is refusing to buy resources from Russia. For the moment, in the short term, I think there's one line going through Ukraine into Germany. but that's a very small line compared to what they used to be getting. And so now they're having to really reintegrate their energy needs in a different way. And one of them was with LNG, liquid natural gas. And they can get that from the United States. They can get that from other places in Africa. But that's, is that enough to help Europe? Probably not. Another place they can get, though, gas and oil is through a pipeline directly from Egypt, believe it or not. So Egypt, now they do have to lay the line, and I think it would go through Cyprus into Greece and then on to Turkey, I believe, or Italy. But that's all in the future. But there's a lot of resources there that Russia loses out to if the West decides to be fully invested through Egypt, as well as into Israel. Israel would provide the oil and gas as well, which goes to refineries in Egypt, I believe, and then from there would be shipped to Europe. And so, this is a very strategic turn of events, if you will, in Ukraine, in which all eyes are now moving southward into the Middle East, both in terms of getting resources as well as delivering resources to Europe. And as far as Russia is concerned, just one more reason to attack the Middle East and take it, if you will, occupy it, sit on it, and thus, increase leverage on the West, at least in its idea to do that. And so, interestingly enough, in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel 38 to be exact, there is a prophecy against a particular nation at the time called Magog. And, this was written some 2,500 years ago, way before any of these nations in the West were even formed. Many of them formed just maybe 500-600 years ago, and that one being Russia. They came out of Mongol domination, the Kievan and Rus states, Moscow and Kiev. They were under the Mongol yoke for a very long time. They came out of it in the 1400s, I believe. And so they're relatively new nations on the earth, really. And the United States only came about in the 1700s, but there's a prophecy against Gog and Magog in the Bible. And of course, this is written at a time when these nations did not exist in the world. At the most, you had these barbaric tribes occupying these lands, as described by Ezekiel, known as the Sarmatians. And but they were, this wasn't the modern equivalent of Russia at all. Very weak, tribal peoples ruling this area. Well, in Ezekiel, or chapter 38 of Ezekiel, this is the prophecy against Gog, as it's stated here. And it says, "The word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn thee back, and put hooks into thy jaws. And I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, and all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, and a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Tagomar, of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have always been lain waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. And thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, and thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands, and many people with thee. Thus saith the Lord God. And it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to take thy hand upon the desolate places that are inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, and dwell in the midst of the land. Excuse me. And of course, this chapter goes on describing, Magog and its great army going into Israel, basically, and into the Middle East, Egypt specifically, to take a great spoil. So, is this war in Ukraine leading up to this event? Well, I think it is. If we're at the very end of the church age, which I think many suspect that, the church age began in 30 AD, and we're almost 2,000 years into it. We've got 7 more years left. Then this war in Ukraine really is just right on time. Not that I want the war to occur, but I'm just saying that these events are here, and Magog in this case is Russia and all of its allies. Russia has its allies. America has her own. We have the NATO, and we have Britain and various other states in Europe. Well, Russia has their allies as well. And amazingly, Ezekiel 38 outlines Magog's allies, which so happens to fit today's allies of Russia. Persia, which is Iran today, Libya, Sudan, Tagamar is in reference to Turkey, I believe. And Turkey plays both sides. They're a member of NATO, but in the Muslim world, you can play both sides. You can be a friend and you can be a foe, and then back to being a friend again. And that's perfectly legal in the Muslim world, and they do that all the time. And Turkey is no different in this case. So even though Turkey might be part of NATO, they really are an ally of Magog, or in this case, Russia. So these are the events that are unfolding, and these are very interesting times that we're in. So again, the Ukraine war is ratcheting up. I say that word all wrong. And I think Ukraine will go on the offensive, and very well could push Russia out of Crimea completely. So keep an eye on that, and I will see you at the next video.